If you think about it, every pro player has an interesting story behind them. There's always some drama hidden under the surface when a pro says, "I just played 12 hours a day." There's always some deep motivation that pushes the player to work as hard as he could. And some of these stories are actually breathtaking. For example, Navi star Zeus had to live in the gaming club and take a shower once a week at his friend's apartment so he could stay on the team and continue to play CS. And today's hero is no exception. Don't forget to leave a like and subscribe because you are watching CYBERSHOKE, and this is the story of Jake Stewie 2K Yip. Jake was born in January 1998 in San Francisco as the youngest in his family. His parents were almost never at home because they went on lots of business trips, so Jake would see them just a few times a year. He fell in love with video games at a young age from watching how his brother played on PC. When Jake got his own computer, he would spend all evening on it. With his family being fairly well off, Jake had not only a PC but also consoles, so he was able to try exclusives from both PlayStation and Xbox. He loved trying a bunch of new titles, then only keeping the ones that he really liked. He was really good at Modern Warfare 2 and League of Legends, but at that time, gaming for him was still just a hobby, and he didn't have any sort of esports ambitions. When Jake was 16, his friends gifted him CSGO, so he could play with them. The guys used names of the Griffin family as nicknames, and that's how Jake became Stewie. Stewie liked CSGO so much that he spent the whole summer playing it, and then started to miss school. Jake's aunt, his main caretaker, had some health issues, so for some time, basically no one controlled how much time he spent in front of his PC. Meanwhile, our hero made the firm decision that he wanted to become a pro player. After half a year of matchmaking, Stewie started to use ESEA, a platform similar to Faceit that was popular in North America back then. From the very beginning, other ESEA players started to accuse Jake of playing with cheats, and there was so much trash talk around his persona that we could easily name Stewie as one of the most infamous players in CSGO. But Jake didn't tilt, and he just continued playing, staying firm in his decision to become a pro player. Here's what he recalls about those times. "One time my parents got a call from the school. They said that if I didn't change my attitude, I would be expelled. So I decided to move to another school where I would have more free time. My parents were furious. They couldn't understand what I was doing with my life." When Stewie was 16, the same age he started playing CSGO, he received an invitation to the Tier 3 team SKDC, and essentially this was the starting point of his esports career. What it meant was now Jake would go to school even less, and his parents weren't exactly happy about that. Eventually, there reached a point where Stewie got an invitation to go to a $30,000 LAN tournament, but his parents wouldn't allow him to go. Right now, you're seeing the recording from 2015, where Stewie is giving an interview to the HLTV reporter at the RGN Pro Series. After that, he goes over to the fans to sign some autographs. That sounds great, doesn't it? But the thing you don't see is that he had to sneak out of the house to go to that tournament. In the next 10 months, Jake received lots of invites from various organizations, but he declined all of them and switched teams only when there was no other way. Stewie joined only the rosters that would give him a lot of free time for individual practices, because being stuck in a Tier 3 scene wasn't a part of his plan. At the end of 2015, Cloud9 and Sean Gares parted ways, and they announced an open invite for players. Anyone could write to their manager, Stunna, and he would decide whether you were suitable for a test. Jake managed to get into the team, and they agreed on a contract, but it would have to start after he turned 18, so that he wouldn't have to argue with his parents about signing it. It was a high risk for Cloud9 because they would have a player without a signed contract for several weeks, but they went for it, and in the end, everything turned out great. On January 11th, 2016, Stewie 2K officially became a member of the top 12 team, Cloud9, after just 1 year of playing CSGO. The first few months in Cloud9 were especially hard for Jake. In order to avoid a huge fight with his parents, he moved to the gaming house without saying a word to them, and he had to constantly fly back home to catch up on school. It was a very hard and stressful time for Stewie, and he remembers that finally finishing school was a huge relief. In April, after just 3 months of training with Stewie, Cloud9 went to Columbus to play on the major. Unfortunately, they lost. The guys were able to win only 12 rounds in total against Navi and G2. C9 had a big problem with their IGL, After failing the major, they signed Slemmy, but he couldn't make things work, so they parted ways in December. Don't get us wrong, at that time Cloud9 were in the top 10 and played pretty well, but they were still a ways away from being the best. And then the teammates made Stewie, the youngest player on the roster, take an IGL role. And as often happens, on the very first try, the result was so impressive that they probably didn't expect it themselves. Cloud9 managed to get into the grand final of ESL Pro League Season 4 in Sao Paulo and had SK Gaming as an opponent. Just think about it. You face the champions of the last 2 majors on their land. You've already lost 7 games against them in a row, and in the group stage, they crushed you 16-6. What chances do you have left? It turns out, surprisingly high. After losing the first map, Cloud9 easily won Mirage and Dust 2 and became the champions.
And Cold might get caught. He's looking down toward the door. He's in the open. It's automatic to give Cloud9 Season 4. And that duo of Stewie and Automatic together on Cloud9 is what brought them back to form, and they show it in the last round to clutch it back.
And it'd be wonderful to say that after that victory, everything was just a walk in the park, but it wasn't. Under Stewie's leadership, in the next 6 months, Cloud9 fell to the top 15, but the team still believed that in time, Jake would be a great IGL. Then they agreed to make the PGL Krakow Major a pivotal moment for the team. If they played well, they'd keep everything as it was. Bad, then changes would have to be made. On that major, Cloud9 didn't get to the playoffs, so they decided to remove Nothing and Shroud and invite Rush and Tarek. Also, Stewie asked to give away his IGL role so he could focus on his individual skills instead, and everyone agreed. There were just 6 months before the Boston Major. Plenty of time, one could say, but considering the big changes in the team that just happened and their lofty ambitions, they needed to start working now, and so they did. The guys managed to gain a foothold in the top 10, and though they didn't win anything, the results were still great. For instance, Cloud9 made it to the top 4 in New York in September and Oakland in November. By the way, have you noticed a trend? That's FaZe, who in 5 months knocked Cloud9 out of big tournaments on 3 separate occasions. It was obvious that FaZe were the favorites of the Boston Major, but then something surprising happened.
He cannot miss a single shot. Guardian waits patiently as Cloud9 sets the push up. Oh, it's happened! They made it work! Cloud9 are your E-League Major champions!
In just a couple of months after that victory, some strange and unexpected headlines began to appear in the news. Stewie left Cloud9 and joined SK. Many people in the community couldn't understand why he'd make that decision. You just won the major and everything in the team's going great, so why go and join SK where no one even speaks your language? Here's what Stewie said about it. I've always considered Fallen one of the best IGLs in Counter-Strike history, and coldzera is one of the strongest players as of today. They reached out to me last moment and told me that I could join their team and that I only had 2 days to make a decision. I was so ashamed that I couldn't look my teammates in the eyes. I felt like I betrayed them, but I also thought that moving to SK would be the best thing I could do for my career. It was incredibly hard to leave Cloud9 since the organization and the team were like a family to me. Analysts unanimously said that on paper, SK's roster didn't look good. Stewie had to fully change his in-game role, and that seriously affected his stats. Take a look. In 2017, most of which he was in IGL and Cloud9, Stewie had a 1.10 KD. But then in 2018, that number dropped down to 1.01. These numbers speak for themselves. And in terms of achievements, SK also didn't show anything outstanding. Stewie played with the Brazil squad for almost a year, and in that time they had won 0 big tournaments. Sure, they were still in the top 10 and they took home a couple of minor trophies, but it wasn't what Jake was hoping for when he left Cloud9. At the end of 2018, it became clear that something wasn't right. Some players like Fallen or Stewie himself would later say that they wanted to give the team one more chance, but the management wanted results. They couldn't afford to be paying top-tier salaries to a team that wasn't even top 5 HLTV. So when Liquid and MIBR managers agreed on a deal, the time of that roster came to an end. On December 21st, 2018, Stewie officially joined Team Liquid, making a comeback to his homeland. And this time, he was a perfect fit for the roster. From January to October 2019, Liquid was the best team in the world, only rarely dropping to second place. They had won numerous big LANs and secured Intel Grand Slam in less than 3 months. It was a triumph for the North American Counter-Strike. For the next several years, Team Liquid continued to be the top 10 team who could beat everyone, but their only problem, or maybe curse, was the dreaded majors. You see, after they reached the grand final on Cologne 2016, their next results just didn't match their level. They managed to make it to the top 4 once, but they usually couldn't make it past the group stage or quarterfinals. Not Grimm's nor Fallen's addition could help to fix this problem. So a year ago, after failing the Stockholm Major, Team Liquid decided that it was time for someone to go, and that someone was Stewie. Jake still played okay, but he lost his touch a bit. He finished 2021 with a 0.94 KD. On the major, this number was even worse, 0.88, an unacceptable result. In January 2022, Stewie signed a contract with the Evil Geniuses. He started to play for them in March and stopped in April. Even on that relatively weak level, Jake still performed badly, finishing that short period with an unspeakably bad 0.74 KD. In the next few months, Stewie didn't say much about his future, until in July, he tweeted that he was going to stream for Evil Geniuses while pausing his pro career. Jake is a legend for the North American Counter-Strike region. Despite his situation with his parents and all the hate he received from the community, he still managed to win a major, a great number of other titles, and secured the Grand Slam. For many people, his decision to quit the pro CSGO scene was very disappointing news. He's still just 24, and there's lots of time to rebuild his career, but it ended up that he wanted something different. Today, Jake continues to stream, gathering thousands of fans in the chat. And if that's what he wants to do after achieving so much as a pro player, then that's the way it should be.